I'm Dwight Drummond. Tonight, with COVID cases continuing to drop and the vaccine rollout going strong, some are asking why Ontario's reopening plan is still days away from taking its next step.
It's time to open. We're way overdue to open. What are we holding back?
Frustrated business owners feel the province is being too cautious, even as the Premier hints a move to Step 2 may happen sooner than planned. Plus,
today, we break ground on the largest subway expansion in Canadian history.
after years of dashed dreams, Scarborough residents finally see progress on new transit as ground is broken on a subway extension. And we're tracking what happens now for the people cleared from Trinity Bellwoods Park, as the mayor says the city will review what happened. The Premier has been teasing the possibility for days, and tonight CBC News has learned the province will bump up the move to the next step in its reopening plan. Chris Glover joins us live tonight. And Chris, you're at Scotiabank Arena, where vaccine drives like the one that will happen there are a big part of the reason this earlier move is now happening.
Toronto's mayor is calling this one Toronto Vaccine Day. So on Sunday, we know that more than 21,000 people have registered to get a vaccine dose here at Scotiabank Arena. And it's really with this ramp up of second doses that led to Ford and his cabinet deciding today to speed up the second step of the reopening plan. But many people are looking at the COVID case counts, which are down so low, and the vaccination rate, which is really up, and wondering why we're not reopening even faster. The patio may be packed at 817 Sports Bar and Grill on Queen Street, but it's the 190-person indoor capacity that operators are hungry to fill up.
It's time to open. We're way overdue to open. And it's frustrating that we're being handcuffed.
Ontario patios opened nearly 2 weeks ago in step 1 of reopening. Indoor dining isn't on the menu in Ontario until step 3, currently scheduled for closer to the end of July.
We're working hard to get the stage 2 as quickly as possible and step 3 as soon as it's safe after that.
But here's the deal. Step 3 calls for 70 to 80% of adults to be vaccinated with 1 dose and 25% to be fully vaccinated. Both those thresholds have already been met, with more than 75% of Ontario adults having 1 shot and roughly 26% of everybody 12 years and up with 2 doses. Plus, vaccine eligibility is expanding again. Starting today, people in 10 public health units considered Delta variant hotspots who received first shots by May 30th can move up their second dose. But it's that more contagious Delta variant that's leading to caution from Toronto and Peel's medical officers.
We do need 2 doses on board to be as protected as we can be.
Each additional week is buying us 10% protection of our eligible vaccine coverage in our community.
CBC News has learned Ford's cabinet is moving Ontario into step 2 of reopening 1 week from today. That's 2 days sooner than currently scheduled.
It's just a matter of days.
Step 2 would allow for personal services to resume.
Yes, I would love to see them open today. I've continued to plead with the province.
But the Retail Council of Canada is pushing the province to skip 2 altogether and allow for step 3 now.
There's no reason for the government to wait until the end of next week. In fact, I would suggest that it's nearly an insult for retailers.
You see many places that are up for lease, that have closed, boarded up.
Seated on his patio with closed storefronts dotting the popular Queen West Strip, Dave Auger couldn't agree more.
I understand we can't rush, but we're beyond the point of where we needed to be slow. Now it's time to open up.
In addition to indoor dining, step 3 would also allow for things like indoor large events, and that would pave the way for places like Scotiabank Arena to get back into business and not just dishing out vaccines. But through speaking with our sources, it does not sound like step 3 was being talked about in terms of speeding that up today, Dwight. That was just a discussion about step 2, speeding that up by a couple of days, and we can expect that announcement to come tomorrow.
Frustration rising along with our vaccination rates. Thank you for this, Chris. What has been talked about for years became a reality today. Work finally started on a Scarborough subway extension that will eventually bring transit relief for area residents. Lorenda Redekop has the details.
It's Zane Curram's last day of grade 11. Pre-pandemic, he'd take the bus more than an hour to another part of Scarborough to school. They've been going back and forth about improving transit in this part of the city for decades.
It's definitely been frustrating. You know, these problems have been happening since ever since I was a toddler, you know. We were promised rapid transit lines to Centennial College, to UFT, all the way to Meadowvale and Shepherd, which is near the Toronto Zoo.
He's also an advocate, and while he says a subway will help, he feels other options were better and cheaper, like light rail, which would have been finished by now if they'd gone ahead.
It's not going to be helping everyone. You know, it's been long overdue. And even afterwards, right, there'll be 7 years while we're stuck on buses.
But today, a 3-stop subway broke ground.
I will always have your back. I will always fight for you. Government after government for over 30 years. You've been ignored here in Scarborough, but that ends now.
The subway extension will run almost 8 kilometres, with stations at Lawrence and McCowan, Scarborough Centre, and north to Shepherd. Construction expected to finish in 2030. There was a plan for light rail for Scarborough, then that was scrapped. The Premier's late brother, former Mayor Rob Ford, pushed for subways.
People want subways, folks. Subways, subways.
Then that was off the table with another LRT plan. Now the subways are back and actually breaking ground. But another transit line, the aging Scarborough RT, is expected to close in 2 years, and it'll still be a long wait for better transit.
From shopping to schools to jobs, this is a great project. It's absolutely fabulous, and I know every single person in Scarborough is happy as punch.
Not everyone.
To be honest, I'm not really glad that they're building a subway. There were different options that they could have taken that could have served more residents, covered more destinations, and just been a much more effective line.
Curram will be finished university by the time the subway opens. He wants to make sure transit riders in this part of the city aren't forgotten. Lorenda Redicop, CBC News, Toronto.
Police have made a second arrest in connection to an alleged hate-motivated assault. Earlier this month, a 24-year-old gay man said he was beaten at Hanlon's Point on Toronto Island. Dale Manuknuk now with the latest.
This morning, 24-year-old Felix Toveron turned himself into police. He was arrested and has since been charged with aggravated assault. He is expected in court on August 4th. Now, 4 days ago, another 24-year-old man, Elijah McGibbon, was also arrested and charged with aggravated assault. He's expected in court on July 26th. This is all related to an incident that took place at Hanlon's Point. According to police, David Gomez and a woman were walking to the ferry docks at around 11:30 p.m. when they became involved in a disagreement with a group of people. That's when one person from that group began hurling homophobic comments towards Gomez. Soon after, Gomez was attacked, punched, and kicked. He was knocked unconscious and suffered a broken nose, cheekbone, and orbital bone, an injury to his hip, and a concussion. In the days after the assault was reported, social media posts alleged that a member of the Canadian Football League's Ottawa Red Blacks was one of the people involved in the attack. The Red Blacks subsequently announced that defensive lineman Chris Larson had been suspended from the team pending an ongoing investigation. CBC Toronto spoke with Larson. He says he didn't have anything to do with the attack. The Red Blacks have not released an update on Larson's status with the team. The investigation is ongoing. Police are still appealing for witnesses to come forward. Anyone who was making their way to the dock between 10 p.m. and midnight, right after the attack occurred, police were looking for 3 suspects, 2 men and a woman who was described as white, 5'5", 180 pounds, and long blonde hair. I also spoke to David Gomez's lawyer, who says that he's pleased with the fact that the police have made this second arrest and are continuing to try and hold those who committed this crime accountable. Dale Manuknuk, CBC News, Toronto.
Toronto Mayor John Tory says there will be a review after a tense standoff between officials and protesters at Trinity Bellwoods Park yesterday. The city operation involved dozens of police officers, municipal workers, and private security guards who were attempting to remove a homeless encampment in the park. Ali Chasson joins us live now from Trinity Bellwoods. And Ali, obviously a much different scene there today.
Yeah, that's for sure. There's just a few security guards here at the site. They've just been making room for the city crews who are still doing that last work of dismantling some of the remaining tents that are still in the park. You know, there's been a lot of chatter about the police response yesterday, and the Toronto police have come out to say that the situation got dangerous once the protesters outnumbered the actual residents in the park. And yes, the fence was toppled a couple of times, and yes, that put people in real danger. However, some say that the whole thing really overshadowed the real crisis at hand, which is housing.
Overall, the homelessness situation is, a complete tragedy.
What happened yesterday at Trinity Bellwoods is still in the air. It's an uneasy feeling for many neighborhood residents who witnessed it.
I would like to see more done, everybody would, in providing better housing for these people. But these tent city situations, they're okay, but they start getting pretty squalid.
Much of today's Q&A at the city's COVID briefing was dominated by questions about how the city handled the situation.
I don't make decisions about where the police go, how many police show up, or how they conduct themselves when they're there. That's decisions that they make.
Mayor John Tory doubles down on what he has decided.
I believe it is fundamentally the correct position that you cannot have unsafe, unhealthy, illegal encampments in public parks in particular, but on other public property as well. And so we're going to continue to try to work with the people experiencing homelessness to convince them to take other housing options that are being offered.
What was being offered was space in a shelter hotel.
We have hotel spaces as well.
I cannot go into a hotel space for health and safety reasons.
While some left with their belongings and headed elsewhere in the city, 12 people from the encampment agreed to move into a shelter hotel. But remember the standoff? After the fence was toppled, the human chain surrounding the last 2 tents to be cleared?
The only thing that would make either of them leave, or want to leave rather, is an offer of permanent, unconditional housing. What we often see is that until there is a standoff like the one that happened yesterday, permanent housing doesn't exist.
Forcing negotiations was the tactic. The violence scene was not. 3 people were arrested.
It was frustrating, but also when you have a response from the city that big, when you have that many police there, you have to expect that people with different wishes, different causes will show up and do what they like, no matter how much we'd like them to support residents and follow their wishes.
One person is in the process of securing an apartment now. The second person from the encampment is still in talks. As for what transpired yesterday, the mayor says
there will be a full review of how you could do anything like this better if there was to be a next time.
The shelter hotels in Toronto are temporary. They do come with supports for people to find housing, but that support, many say, is spotty at best. So the fight continues for more permanent and accessible housing, even after the chaos has cleared here at Trinity Bellwoods. Send it back to you, Dwight.
Thank you, Ali. Well, anyone looking to rent in Toronto right now is seeing monthly rates lower than they've been in years, but with the pandemic easing, those prices may not last. Greg Ross explains.
It's a good time to be a renter in Toronto. Chris Lewern can certainly attest to that. He now lives a lot closer to his mother and was able to get a lot more space for him and his fiancée.
We were at Peter in Richmond in a small, one-bedroom condo, 618 square feet. And for not that much more money, we found a 5-story, 2,500 square foot townhouse at King and Bathurst.
Oh, hello.
Mandy Frode actually got a bigger place for less money and didn't have to leave her building in Liberty Village.
It was much bigger, a few floors below. So our rent was reduced by $200, but our square footage went up about $300. Where are you going?
Frode and Lewern were able to take advantage of pandemic rental prices in Toronto. But it's not good news for landlords who rely on rental income.
It was a very hard year to witness and to go through.
Real estate agent Lisa Patel represents a number of landlords. She has one client that had a condo sit vacant for 7 months last year before finally dropping the price.
We went from a $2,300 unit that was a 1-bedroom to renting it out for $1,800-$1,900.
Definitely seen, the rental market have probably its biggest crisis in the last, several decades.
Pauline Learman is the director of market research for Urbanation. She says for the first year of the pandemic, rental prices in Toronto were on a steady decline. In March of this year, rents were down 16% year over year across Toronto. But in Old Toronto, which includes the downtown core, rents were down 18%. Now, we have seen some changes to Toronto's rental market in recent months. While rental prices are still way down since March, they've slowly started to creep back up.
For example, between April and May, monthly rents actually climbed 1.9%, so almost 2%. The previous quarter had been previous month had been 1.4%. We would probably expect if this trend continues to actually see the market fully recover by early next year.
Learman says some of the key factors will be students returning to school and the workforce returning to the office as we move out of the pandemic. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
Check your ticket. After going unclaimed for weeks, the $70 million Lotto Max jackpot has finally been won. Last night's pot will be split with someone in Ontario and someone else in BC, each taking home a cool $35 million. There were also 46 $1 million prize winners. 21 of those winning tickets were sold in Ontario. The jackpot for the next draw on June 25th will be an estimated $50 million, with 2 Maximilian prizes up for grabs. And Colin and I are both here. Obviously, the office pool did not win.
Well, have you checked your tickets, though, Dwight?
I have now. We got to talk to Grant, who's our office pool guy, to see if he's checked up for us.
See, so this is the thing. We're actually in that sweet spot when no one has come forward yet in Ontario, and we haven't checked our tickets. So it's like, hey, it's still possible, right? I don't think I'll check mine. I'll just stick here.
Did y'all warn me there was going to be?
We'll just stick here for a moment. Morning temperatures, this is what we are talking about. It was a little cool, right? We had some single digits to begin the day, 7 in Oshawa. In fact, Kitchener, 5 degrees, but then it warmed up pretty nicely with all the sunshine and feeling pretty good, too. That breeze out of the south-southeast, it's 23 degrees, 21 in Oshawa. And by the way, Humidex, there isn't one, so it sits right there. Just what we have is what you get. And not only that, you know, we're just coming off the first official day of summer, the longest day of daylight through the year, 15 hours and 26 minutes and change. A few seconds added on to that. And, you know, since then, we've only lost about 8 seconds. So what I mean is that we're still getting a lot of sunshine. Sun's up early, and it doesn't set till a few minutes after 9 o'clock. So lots of opportunity to enjoy the fine weather. Southerly winds, not very strong. Now, those will be picking up tomorrow. We'll see them a little gustier. However, we will stay dry for tomorrow at least. 16 degrees overnight tonight. The humidity is coming in and a little more heat with that southerly flow. So 27 feeling closer to 30. As for when we will see some rain showers, I'll have that coming up, Dwight.
Thank you, Colette.
This weather update is brought to you by Train. For a limited time, take advantage of 36 equal payments and 0% financing. It's hard to stop a train.
Canada's members of Parliament are heading home for the summer, and they may also be heading into an election soon. The House of Commons wrapped up the session earlier today, and the political posturing started almost immediately. Rafi Boudjikanian has more.
Conservatives will do whatever we can to replace the corrupt government.
Listen closely, and it's almost like everyone here knows it may be the last time this House sits before Canadians decide whether to give them their jobs back. So they auditioned.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's own budget promised to create 1 million jobs by the end of this month. How's that going? Has he followed through on that commitment? No. In fact, we're losing jobs, and all employment gains made by women in my lifetime have been completely wiped out.
The plan was in Budget 2021, which was a plan to create jobs, grow the middle class, and ensure long-term growth, including by extending supports to Canadians through the summer into the fall. Unfortunately, the Conservatives will be voting against extending those benefits.
The leader of the official opposition set the tone at a caucus speech that drew battle lines.
4 parties on the left, the Liberals, the NDP, the Greens, and the Bloc Québécois, give the illusion of choice and debate, but there is no such thing. It's an agenda of 4 shades of red.
That seems to be just about the only thing he and Justin Trudeau agree on.
I hope that parties that call themselves progressive, like the Bloc and the NDP, will work with us. The Conservative Party is still doing everything they can to block this very important work.
The NDP attempting to distinguish itself today.
People want universal pharmacare. New Democrats presented it, Conservatives voted against it, as well as the Liberals.
Yet over the last 20 months, this Parliament has collaborated on multiple occasions, passing legislation such as COVID-19 unemployment benefits. But this week, Justin Trudeau's taken to calling the House a place of toxicity and obstructionism, suggesting he may have his eyes on opinion polls that show he's ahead of the Conservatives, and ready to make a play to regain his majority soon. Rafi Bujikanian, CBC News, Ottawa.
As Rafi mentioned, Conservative leader Erin O'Toole spoke to his caucus today. During his speech, he linked the cancellation of some Canada Day celebrations to reconciliation efforts with Indigenous people. O'Toole accused activists of tearing down Canada.
Road to reconciliation, the road to equality, the road to inclusion does not involve tearing Canada down. I'm concerned that injustices in our past or in our present are too often seized upon by a small group of activist voices who use it to attack the very idea of Canada itself. We are seeing news this week of Canada Day celebrations being cancelled. Canada Day, our day of celebration. I can't stay silent when people want to cancel Canada Day.
Indigenous Affairs Minister Mark Miller says this year's festivities are a good time to reflect on the atrocities of residential schools in Canada. He adds for some, July 1st can be a deeply wounding time because of Canada's history of colonial violence.
There are many Canadians that want to celebrate what I believe to be one of the best countries in the world. But for many, that isn't the shared reality. And I think that's the diversity of our country. It is, I think, on reflection, it is in part what makes our country able to look at itself and say, we're not perfect. Indeed.
Questions are being raised about a prominent Indigenous Studies professor at Queen's University. Robert Lovelace and a handful of other people affiliated with the school are facing allegations on social media that they've been falsely claiming to be Indigenous. Amanda Pfeffer takes a closer look at Lovelace's claim and the controversy.
Thank you, and without further ado, I would like to welcome Ian Fanning and Robert Lovelace to begin our conversation.
Bob Lovelace has been teaching Indigenous curriculum at Queen's for more than 2 decades. His activism for Indigenous rights made headlines in 2008, arrested trying to stop a uranium mine at Sharbot Lake, and cheered on his release.
Do you know why he's in jail?
I think he led.
On Queen's campus, student video depicted a hero, but his work on behalf of Algonquin people is questioned by Algonquin chief Wendy Jocko. In a statement she wrote to CBC, it's clear that Lovelace and others in his group have interfered in the affairs of the Algonquins of Ontario. Lovelace also lost a case that went to the Supreme Court of Canada in a bid to access casino money for his adopted community, the Ardoch Algonquin First Nation. His adoption by the community in a lakeside ceremony in the 1990s is one of the reasons his credibility and the credibility of Ardoch is under fire.
There's, a problem. How can a Cherokee person suddenly become the leader of an Algonquin community?
Lovelace himself says he was uncomfortable with the adoption in a post in 2012. This adoption has caused me no end of pain. I am shunned and rumored about. There is a very popular rumor that I am not Indian at all.
Their communities.
Concern about Lovelace's authenticity came to a head when his name appeared in an anonymous report alleging 6 people affiliated with Queen's have been falsely claiming Indigenous heritage. CBC looked closer at his assertion he was born American Cherokee, using information about Lovelace's family, identified by Lovelace himself. Cherokee genealogist David Cornsilk looked through census data and Cherokee records. He says in his opinion, he doesn't recognize Lovelace as Cherokee.
And so they've got a lot of strikes against them that would lead you to a conclusion based on a preponderance of the evidence that these are non-Native people.
There is a growing movement of Indigenous leaders and scholars who say the question of who is and who isn't Indigenous should be up to the First Nations themselves. CBC spoke to Bob Lovelace. He declined to comment on the advice of his lawyer. Queen's University won't comment on individual faculty members, but it has said in the past it stands by its staff. Amanda Pfeffer, CBC News, Ottawa.
Today, Ontario released a new roadmap to guide the recovery of the province's tourism industry.
The visitor economy in Ontario has saw unprecedented losses. The Ontario government is very pleased to release this final report prepared by the Tourism Economic Recovery Ministerial Task Force, making 10 solid recommendations on how to support Ontario's $36 billion tourism industry recover from the COVID-19 pandemic.
The recommendations include reducing red tape for tourism businesses, as well as incentives such as travel points, cards, or to get Ontarians out of their homes. The task force also recommends building on existing itineraries and trails and better promoting outdoor activities for mental and physical health benefits. Final details of a 5-year recovery plan are expected to be released this summer. Workers from the travel industry staged a rally outside the British Parliament today. They are calling on the government to reopen the sector. It has lost tens of thousands of jobs and has taken on billions in debt because of the pandemic. Tessa Arcilia has the story.
Allow safe travel! Allow safe travel! We're here in front of Parliament in central London, where hundreds of people have gathered from the travel industry. They're calling this a travel day of action, and they want the government to hear just how catastrophic this period has been for their sector, and also at the impact that government policies have had on their businesses. Now, it is true that other sectors have experienced difficulties as well, but they say that the challenges their industry have experienced is quite unique. Take a listen to this.
I don't know of any other industry that has had to shut down for such a long time with limited support and understanding from the government. We're unlike the catering or the pub industry that, you know, yes, okay, they've been able to open up slowly but sure, but at least the minute they open, they get money coming through the tills. The travel industry just doesn't work like that.
What do we want? Financial support! The Association of British Travel Agents estimate that around 195,000 jobs have either already been lost or are in danger of being lost. They want the government to add more countries to the green list and to reassess the current restrictions in place. They want more consideration for people who are fully vaccinated and perhaps lifting quarantine and testing requirements. Now, some companies have taken the legal route. Airlines like TUI, Virgin Atlantic, and the parent company of British Airways have supported legal action. Ryanair have recently launched that action against the government, calling for more transparency in how the government decides which countries go onto what list, the red, the green, or the amber. Now, we are expecting to hear from the British government in the next few days on updates to those quarantine and travel requirements. Tessa Arcilia, CBC News, London.
The Trans-Canada Highway is now closed at the border between New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. Protesters have blocked the road because of a sudden change in COVID-19 travel restrictions imposed by Nova Scotia. Preston Mulligan with the details.
With no end in sight yet for the blockade, RCMP try to manage the frustration of the hundreds of truck drivers stuck at the border, many of whom support the protesters but direct their anger at the Premier of Nova Scotia. People in this border town have long been frustrated with the pandemic restrictions, saying their numbers were low, but they bear the brunt of the restrictions. As travelers wait it out, they spread the blame. Who are you frustrated with?
Obviously the Premier. He backed out on his word, so, you know, a man's word is supposed to be the Bible, and so he backed out, so very, very discouraging.
Because all they're doing is putting regular people out of their money and out of their way, and they're just causing commotion. And there's better ways of doing this kind of thing.
I was just talking with a Mountie a few minutes ago, and he was saying probably another 24 hours.
Most urgent is the situation at the hospital in Amherst. 110 appointments canceled because the New Brunswick staff can't cross the border. Managers here say they've been forced to negotiate with protesters through the RCMP about who gets to come to work.
While our staff are delayed at the border, we know that this also likely means patients' families who are seeking care are also delayed. Our colleagues at the IWK, for example, has asked that we convey to you that they have critical supplies stuck in the blockade. They have supplies there that are needed for diagnostic tests for babies and mums at the IWK, and they're time sensitive and will expire if they can't get through.
Preston Mulligan, CBC News, at the New Brunswick-Nova Scotia border.
Well, while Canada slowly opens up, other countries around the world are clamping down.
Clearly, this is an evolving situation we would have preferred not occurred. But given what
new restrictions were introduced today in parts of Sydney, Australia, on gatherings and movement of some people for a week. A new outbreak has now swelled to more than 30 cases. This virus cluster is being blamed on the Delta variant, and there are fears that has spread to neighboring New Zealand, which raised the alert level in its capital today. now one level short of a lockdown. And in one of the world's most vaccinated countries, Israel, there is now a push to get more shots into teens. Just 2 to 4% of 12 to 15-year-olds in Israel have been vaccinated. Daily cases in Israel more than doubled to 125 this week after outbreaks at 2 schools linked to the Delta variant. In response, the country's prime minister announced border restrictions could be extended. While those in other nations deal with Delta, India is sounding the alarm about another variant, Delta Plus. Freelance journalist Neha Punya is in New Delhi with more.
The Indian government has identified the Delta Plus variant as a variant of concern. It's a mutation of the original Delta variant that wreaked havoc on India during the second wave, leading to a catastrophic surge in cases, deaths and hospitalizations. Now, it's unclear how different the Delta Plus variant is from the original, but initial studies have shown it's just as infectious and fast spreading. 40 cases have been found in 7 Indian states. The Indian government has issued warnings to 3 states where a majority of these cases have been found, asking these regions to impose containment measures to ensure that this variant does not spread to other regions. It's unclear if this variant can also be neutralized by the existing vaccines at India's disposal. Experts have been warning that given India's slow vaccination pace, there is room for the virus to continue to mutate, and we're seeing the first proof of that. So far, India's only fully vaccinated just about 5% of all Indians, but its target is hugely ambitious. It aims to vaccinate all 900 million adults by the end of this year. India needs to prioritize vaccinating all adults to ensure that as lockdown restrictions are eased, Indians can stay protected. Neha Punya for CBC News, New Delhi.
Coaches push me every day, they motivate me, and I'm just so happy. Like, that's not the end of it, I hope.
Oh, we hope so too. We're just 1 month away from the Olympics in Tokyo. Canada's roster is becoming a little more clear. We'll have a look at some of the stars to keep an eye on in the pool just a little later in the show. Hollywood North is back. The Toronto International Film Festival will be on this September. It will run between the 9th and 18th with indoor screenings across the city. To talk about this year's festival, we've reached out to the executive director and co-head of TIFF, Joanna Vicente. So, Joanna, how excited are you to be back with a more normal festival this year?
Very excited. We really wanted to paint a picture of what we're hoping to have in September and be back in person with our big venues, the Princess of Wales and Roy Thompson Hall, but at the same time keeping the drive-ins and the outdoor venue from last year and our digital platforms. So excited to be able to reach audiences across Canada, but really focusing on the in-person experience and hopefully even be able to bring some filmmakers in.
In terms of size, how big do you think this year's festival will compare to, say, a non-pandemic year?
So as you know, we reduced our slate last year. We went from 250 films to 50 films plus some special events. So we're really not going back yet to the levels of 2019, but hoping to have a more robust slate of films this year.
Well, let's talk about the films. What are some of the films you're most excited about? Can you give us a sneak peek?
Yes, we're really excited to have the opportunity to present Dune to audiences in IMAX. So IMAX is a technology that was created in Canada. So to do that at the Cinesphere is just really thrilling. Denis Villeneuve, an incredible Canadian filmmaker, also you know, with the Denise Goulet, with Night Riders, that premiered early in the year in Berlin. Really excited to showcase that for audiences, since that was just on a digital platform back in February. And, you know, there's another Canadian film by Canadian filmmakers, Charlotte. It's an animation film that both Cameron and I really love. So really excited to bring some big films from big filmmakers and some Discovery first features.
Yeah, excited about the IMAX experience. Now, the movies are only part of TIFF. We usually have the galas and red carpets where we can see the stars. Can we expect those two to be back?
So we are not going to have parties in festival streets. So definitely continuing to follow, the instructions and continuing to have reduced capacity and have safety protocols in place. But we are excited that hopefully with the borders, potentially opening sometime before the festival, that we could welcome some filmmakers and talent back would be fantastic. It's so thrilling for talent when they present for the first time their film to audiences, to be there, to share their experience, to engage with audience. So we're really hoping for that. It would definitely be a different kind of red carpet. We would make sure that we would have all of the safety precautions in place.
Yeah, we love when the stars come to check out our great town. We're not fully there yet, but we are on the right path. So, Joanna, we are excited for you and what this year's TIFF will hold. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
For the weather, Colin, I'm kind of feeling we're in that enjoy it while it lasts moment, right?
Yeah, I was talking about this earlier on radio today about how this is kind of, for many people, the place they want to be. Yesterday was just a little bit too cool. Tomorrow might be just a little too warm or too humid, so enjoy this weather while we have it. I know it does please many. 23 degrees at the moment is our temperature, and that's coming in at Pearson, 22 in Hamilton, Oshawa, 21. Now I'm going to do something. I'm going to show you the Humidex and see if you can find anywhere where there's actually a change. Oh, okay. Yeah, the numbers moved around, but I mean in terms of actually going up, Oshawa went up 1. Yeah, that's all that we're seeing because the humidity isn't a factor. That's just the point that I'm making. And tomorrow we'll start to see those dew points creeping up, the Humidex going up likely to around 30 for Toronto, but some areas around the Niagara region, yeah, you might be feeling that it's a little bit closer towards 32 or so with that Humidex value. So things changing and getting a little bit stickier. Our sustained winds are coming in general from the south to southwest now. Through much of the day, it was more of a southeasterly flow. This is also what's going to help to push the temperatures up tomorrow, along with how sticky the air is going to feel. Now, there were a few showers trying to make their way into southwestern Ontario earlier, and then they kind of just die out and losing any strength that they have as they make it over the international border. We'll have partly cloudy to mostly clear skies overnight tonight all around the Golden Horseshoe. Tomorrow morning, we'll be into the clear, lots of sunshine, and then we'll start to see first some high-level clouds move in the afternoon and then some mid-level and beyond as well. So it does become a little more overcast through the afternoon hours. Now, Friday, it does look like much of the shower activity is going to push through cottage country, stay to the north of the city. A few scattered thunderstorms in there as well on Friday, but just watch along the shores here how we tend to stay a little drier until we get towards the late evening hours on Friday. And as for the rain showers on Saturday, it looks like some of the models really want to push that a little further north until we get later into the afternoon. Look at your highs for tomorrow and your Humidex for tomorrow. So maybe late afternoon, evening Saturday, some of this will hold off, but there is going to be some wet weather that we need coming in on the weekend, and the temperatures back closer to seasonal or above, Dwight.
Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
As we head to break, here's a look at where the markets closed today. The TSX closed down by 36 points. The Dow also down by 71. Our dollar trading higher at 81.39 cents US. We will be right back. Protesters gathering at City Hall today opposing Canada's participation in the 2022 Winter Olympics in China.
And the Olympics' mission is to promote peace and a better world through sports. Clearly, China is not interested in that. Since 2008, when they hosted the Summer Olympics, things have gotten worse.
The demonstrators accuse China of multiple human rights abuses. They want the Canadian government and the Canadian Olympic Committee to boycott the Games, which are taking place in Beijing next February. They're also pointing to the detention of Canadians Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig in China on suspicion of espionage as a reason for Canada to boycott the Games. It's just 1 month until the Olympic Games in Tokyo. We now have more details of what we can expect. But as Katie Starr reports, questions remain and public support is shaky.
In just 1 month's time, the world's best handball athletes will play in this venue behind me.
This week, Olympic organizers announced that there will be domestic spectators allowed at events, capped at a venue's maximum capacity of 50% and up to 10,000 people. But what really caused waves in Japan were media reports that the organizers were actually considering allowing those spectators to kick back with a cold beer while watching the sports. A huge backlash happened, and the Tokyo Olympics president, Seiko Hashimoto, had to come out and say that no, alcohol will be banned at the events. New outlines for those spectators were also released on Wednesday. Protocols include no cheering allowed and no high fives. So it's definitely going to be a different kind of games. Concerns are still growing in this country that hosting the games will lead to a rebound in COVID cases. The latest Kyodo News report showed that polling the country, 86% of respondents said that they were concerned about hosting the games. And indeed, the first foreign athlete to test positive for the coronavirus since arriving in Japan happened over the weekend, with Team Uganda now in quarantine. There are worries that the promised safe and secure games could actually turn into a super spreader games. Katie Starr, CBC News, Tokyo.
Toronto's Penny Oleksiak is getting ready for next month's Olympics with a first place showing at the Canadian Olympic Swim Trials.
It looks like she's going to get there, Oleksiak.
I'm so happy, I don't even have words right now. I did not expect to go at 52. I haven't done that in so long.
And we're so happy for you. 52.89 was her time. That was good enough for the 21-year-old Oleksiak to win the women's 100-meter freestyle. Oleksiak won a surprise gold, remember this, in the 100-meter freestyle back in 2016 at those Olympics. And here's a look at Canada's Olympic women's soccer team. The reigning back-to-back bronze medalists will be led, of course, by Christine St. Clair in her 4th Olympic Games. Some local athletes on the squad includes Brampton's Khadija Buchanan, Quinn from Toronto, and Jade Riviere from Markham. Canada will take on Japan in the opening match on July 21st. George Brown dance student is sparking change by challenging traditions in ballet. The school says the students' pursuit of dancing on pointe shoes has helped spur more gender-fluid practices in its ballet training. And as Talia Ricci reports, before this non-binary dancer came along, the class had ever only been made up of women.
I was working backstage on a production of The Nutcracker, and one of the dancers after the show decided to throw out her shoes. And I picked them out of the garbage and tried them on, and then they fit. And in that, I just fell in love with what pointe was and dancing. Hi, my name is BB Brunges. I'm a student here at George Brown College.
How do you feel when you're dancing on pointe?
It's the power and the strength and the elegance. It's just a very well-rounded practice.
Kind of going against the grain in some of the old ways that ballet and pointe can be traditional. Was there any nervousness on your end pitching that you do pointe?
Oh, absolutely. There were moments where I felt like I hadn't been taken seriously as a performer. There were also times where I felt like I had to suppress my femininity and really overcompensate because of that. Being at George Brown and applying to the school, all of my interviews beforehand, I was very diligent in mentioning that I wanted to focus on being feminine and really embracing that side of me. And so when pointe showed up, I was like, okay, this is a risk, because in my head, I was thinking that it was like some sort of scientific reason why I shouldn't be doing pointe. Come to think of it, that was very naive. But when I thought about it, I was like, okay, why not? It's just something that's gonna add on to my training, and I don't think any of my teachers are going to speak against that.
The more diversity of people you have with a skill, the more creativity you're going to infuse into what comes out of that skill. And so I really look forward to seeing how that translates as more and more people of all different skills and creativities and genders are dancing on pointe.
I'm so pleased to see the growth of our art form and to see it changing with society, and we could do a better job of changing faster, but I'm glad that it is changing.
What do you want kids who are gender nonconforming and see you doing this? What do you want them to think or feel?
I can do it too, but they're way more than just shoes. Being an example for people to see something that they don't typically see. It's just exciting, and I want like anyone to know that they can do it and that it doesn't matter what other people think. Like, it's what makes you feel good.
That is our show for tonight. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 6. Stay safe and have a great night, everybody.